Hello everyone, welcome back into MLS Digest. I'm Camille here to preview the Week 7 slate. It's coming your way April 5th and 6th with another full 15-match lineup this weekend. And we also had Champions Cup return earlier this week for the quarterfinal stage. The first legs have already been played earlier this week with 4 MLS teams still alive. LAFC taking on Miami, and then the Whitecaps taking on Pumas from Liga MX, and LA Galaxy taking on Tigres from Liga MX. And the second legs of those will all be in the midweek following this Week 7 slate. And I'll get you caught up on everything you need to know for those matchups, and of course all Week 7 matchups and important lineup and notable injury news. And this is obviously a little late on my end, so if you're still tuning into this week's episode, I very much appreciate your support. Make sure to like this video down below. Comment also what matchups you're looking forward to the most. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe to help the channel grow further. First up, we have Charlotte hosting Nashville. And it's clear that Charlotte is really still not in that elite category in the East, even though I predicted them to be just slightly better because of their additions over the offseason, such as Zaha, that can probably get them that 4th spot for the playoffs and give them that home series advantage in the first round. I think that's probably just about their peak because they still don't really show many signs of improving on the road. They have 9 out of 9 points this season at home in their 3 games, but in their 3 road games, just 1 out of the possible 9 points they could have gotten. You know, that first week against Seattle was the only point they got, and they still, to me, didn't really deserve that point, didn't really create too much, in that game. And then in the 2 away games since, have just looked completely second best and off the pace to Miami and this past week in Week 6, the Rapids. But they return home here against Nashville. And Nashville was building momentum with 3 wins in a row, obviously, before last week, but Hani Mukhtar missed a penalty in the game against Cincy, and then another penalty was called this time against them, in which Kevin Denke put it away in basically stoppage time to win it for Cincy. And so Nashville, knocked down a little bit from that last weekend on the road as well. Against Charlotte, it's just not an easy place to come win. Charlotte is just locked down, and now they get Privet back from last week, even though, he missed last week, and Tim Ream slotted in there, and that was okay enough until Colorado kind of got those 2 goals late. That's going to be a big boost for them to kind of have that full strength back line, even though I think Ream is completely fine in that actual natural center back position. But really, nothing really to worry about from an injury perspective for either of these teams. Nashville's midfield has looked very, very good in specific games this season, especially obviously during that stretch. But against Charlotte here on the road, it's really hard to call. Charlotte actually defensively, by the metrics, hasn't really been all that exceptional compared to kind of the past year and a half or so under Dean Smith. But being at home, it just seems like a completely different team. Defensively, that's when they really lock it down, and they know how to take their chances on the break. So if they give Nashville the ball, I think they'll be, I think that's kind of how they'll set up and organize. But at the moment, it's just it's just such a two-faced team that, you can't really take previous results, even from the previous week, too much into hand, because here at home, Charlotte just really flips a switch, and that's what I expect. Nashville, I think still the jury is really still out as to how high they can be in the East. I think they'll definitely contend for some of those final playoff spots with the things they've shown so far. But I'm going to take Charlotte to win in this one by a 2-1 scoreline. Moving on to the second game on Saturday in one of the early windows as well. It's RSL hosting the Galaxy. And both of these teams coming off losses in Week 6. But I'm targeting teams specifically this week in a sense, going against teams in this Champions Cup action, because we are at this quarterfinal stage. And, whether maybe even the Galaxy specifically, I think, were taking this competition all that seriously or not, they have advanced this far, and now they are in a position where they can, probably won't, I don't expect them to, but can and have a chance at, beating Tigres, although that second leg will be away. And they are on that bit of a schedule congestion again, where they played last weekend's match on Saturday night and then had to play Tuesday already for that first leg. And they just really don't have the squad rotation at the moment, especially with a couple other injuries to that back line now with Yoshida to kind of really deal with this as well as they could. They have gotten Paintsel back, but he's really only played, I think he played like 30 minutes in his first game, and then in the Champions Cup first leg played 45 minutes. So he's still working his way back up. Maybe he doesn't even start in this one, and also they preserve him for the Tigres game, the second leg. And so that's where I'm going with for this first best bet. I think the Real Salt Lake money line has really good odds. They haven't even drawn a game yet this season. 2 wins, 4 losses. Back-to-back losses actually without scoring. But last week's game was against a Minnesota team that is one of the best defensively. It was also the pitch was absolutely terrible in that one. We were on the under in that game, which hit, and it was just not, the conditions kind of played a factor into really how much momentum either team could really get. But RSL's back at home here in the altitude advantage against an LA Galaxy team that is clearly in a look-ahead spot for that second leg, and a tired team at that as well, that's going to be preserving themselves even if they're maybe not too tired from the first leg, because it's still about 4 or 5 days between that first leg and here, but going to be preserving themselves for that Tigre second leg. And both these teams really top 5 or something like that, or bottom 5 actually, I mean, in terms of their expected goals allowed throughout this season already so far. So while RSL is giving up chances, LA Galaxy even worse on that perspective. And even though they have gotten Paintsel back in the 2 games, that he's played already, just because he's back on that wing, that does not fix this midfield problem that the Galaxy have. Royce has been battling injuries and he's currently out. Obviously, Puig's out for most of the season, and they're missing these real, chance creators and people who can actually play in these wingers and actually get in these transition moments, because otherwise maybe Paintsel and Peck can isolate some duels in certain moments, maybe 1 or 2 times a game. But other than that, LA Galaxy really has no one to kind of take that attention off of them and actually provide the quality service that this front 3 can and will need. And so with that altitude advantage as well, RSL is also going to be getting back a PO from his red card suspension. We saw them roll out a 4-4-2 in that game that he did get the red card in very, very early on against Dallas, which they lost. And so maybe they kind of go back to that and actually get a real full game experimenting with Piol and Ajago in that 4-4-2, and that actually might kind of help them, and maybe that might be a better formation for them. But everyone, like I said, healthy for RSL. Galaxy dealing with their own injury problems, and I think everything lines up for this to be a good spot to take RSL in. They just can't seem to draw anyways. So LA Galaxy has been drawing their past couple of road games, but it took a very late equalizer in that one where they were down 2-1 to Minnesota, and then another one where a blatant penalty was not called against Portland in the final stages of that match that would have given Portland a penalty. So I think as bad as the Galaxy's results have looked this season, they probably should be even worse, and I don't think Paintsel being back completely fixes this team just yet. Start the main night slate. It's Atlanta taking on Dallas, and Atlanta came back from 3-1 down against NYC at home to win 4-3. Meanwhile, Dallas now with back-to-back wins of their own, with another win now against KC, coming back and actually taking the lead all in the first half, before in the second half it was really just a game where Dallas was clearly not playing as risky, really letting Kansas City have the ball, and Kansas City's quality is obviously they just don't have it. And so they were able to hold on to that lead after previous home games already this season, where they, especially against the Fire, where they were in a winning position and, kind of probably kind of exposed themselves a little bit too much trying to put away that lead, and then ultimately even lost that game. And so Dallas kind of also one of the teams with the least possession so far this season. And even against KC, even though they were playing like that as well, even when they got moments where they kind of won the ball back and maybe could have, countered a little bit, maybe pushed up a little bit forward, sent a player or two extra. It's just not a team right now that is very capable of having a lot of possession of the ball. And Atlanta really seemed like they turned a corner with this win. I expected them to win, but not in this fashion. Obviously, coming back from 3-1 is just crazy. But it's clear that Dyla now maybe has a better sense of where his players are a little bit better suited. We saw Moranchuk play a little bit deeper so that he could kind of have a little bit more time to make these decisions and actually play in some line-breaking passes and kind of control the tempo for Atlanta's offense a little bit more. And then Lobjanidze on the right could be a little bit of a better situation for this Atlanta team to kind of free up maybe some other wingers that are on the left side of that depth chart. They're dealing with some midfield problems, but I think Atlanta in this game should probably have more of the possession. Dallas is always a threat to kind of create some chances of their own and just have that individual brilliance with that Lucho and Musa kind of chain of command up there. But Anderson Julio still, I don't know what's going on with his visa. I don't think he's going to be back yet for this one. And I think Atlanta wins this one. I'm going to go for around a 3-1 or something like that scoreline. I think Dallas's defense has actually been probably a little bit better than we expected so far by the metrics. But Atlanta with a full-strength attack, I think that win might have them turn a corner here. And even though Dallas has yet to lose on the road through three away games, 2 wins and 1 draw, I think this is the one where they finally maybe get a little bit caught out by the quality that this other team that they're going to be facing has with all the possession Atlanta's going to have. And Dallas might kind of really struggle to get the ball, and that's going to hurt them against an Atlanta attack that maybe finally has been a little bit more efficient and will start actually putting away their big chances. Next up, it's the Union hosting Orlando City. And these two teams played in week 1 where Philly at the time had a surprising shock win compared to all the expectations we had for Philly this season, which were very, very little expectations. And now they meet again after that 4-2 win by Philly in week 1. And it's really hard not to expect more of the same in this one. Both of these teams are top 3 in expected goals through 6 weeks so far, but also Orlando bottom 5 in terms of expected goals allowed. Philly on the other end is kind of middle of the pack, so pretty average there, good enough. And Philly, yes, coming off the loss against Miami, while Orlando coming off the win against the Galaxy, but Orlando really didn't do anything all too impressive in that Galaxy when the Galaxy are the Galaxy, who we've already talked about earlier in the episode. And the goals, I mean, it was a penalty that was kind of controversial there for Orlando, and then a free kick by Muriel that I believe it was McCarthy starting that game. Absolute howler of a goal to let in on that free kick. And so really nothing too much that Orlando did in that game to kind of give them the win. More so LA Galaxy shooting themselves in the foot. But this should be another high-scoring game. And I expect Philly to kind of carry the load in this one because Orlando also having to deal with that travel going to LA and coming back. And also Orlando just plays this very, very risky style. None of their games have had both teams not score. And so they've given up a goal in every game. The Union a little bit more solid offensively, and they're going to be fully fit once again. And I just expect them to light it up. So that's where I'm going with for this second best bet, the Union team total over 1.5. While, yes, probably Orlando should at least score 1 or potentially even 2 for the normal game over to probably get there, I think Philly, once again, is going to be carrying the load here. I think they're the far more impressive team so far out of these two. I don't really trust Orlando City's defense, especially on the road. And I think after that Miami loss, they're going to wake up a little bit and put on a show here. The weather should be good and everything. And yeah, I mean, this should be a shootout either way, but I think Philly probably wins this one anyways. And the kind of price difference between them to win and this is kind of a little bit marginal. The price I'm getting is probably not the best because of being in Florida and Hard Rock, but you could probably get this a little bit better. But I'm going to keep that as the show play price. Probably look for a better one. You should probably find it. Next up, it's the Crew hosting Montreal. And this is one of two games. There's a couple other games. This is one of two games that are truly at risk of being either rained out or just having terrible weather, such as that Minnesota RSL game last week where the pitch is going to be absolutely drenched. The other one is the Cincy game, both of these being in Ohio. And, Montreal, this is the final game of their 7-game road trip to start the season. They picked up a good point against the Fire coming back in that one in their first game with the interim head coach after Courtois got sacked. Meanwhile, the Crew went to DC, picked up a good win, and they're still unbeaten through 6 weeks. And, even though Montreal picked up that point, let's be serious here. It's hard not to fade them, even from last season. I mean, I've made it a point in terms of the bets. I've already faded them a couple times this season. It didn't work out last week, but that's neither here nor there, honestly. It's just Montreal on the road. I think they picked up that point last week, which was good, but against the Crew, who are unbeaten, I mean, it's going to be very difficult to even pick up a point in this one. But the weather conditions could work in their favor because we saw in that Fire game that it really got ugly in the second half once it started really pouring, and the pressing for Montreal was really a very good thing going for them. So if that's going to continue at that level under the interim head coach, and they play with that same energy, then they're definitely going to grind out some results, especially once they start playing at home finally in the following week. But I do see this one being obviously lower scoring because of the weather. I don't think it's going to change at this point, because also with this episode being a little bit later, we also have that benefit of actually the weather being a little bit more predictable, with it only being a day away and actually sticking true to what it says. And so I think the Crew get this one done, but it's going to be an ugly one. Montreal, despite that point last week, have only scored in 2 of their 6 games so far. And the Crew got Moreira back. Nagbe is dealing with an injury, but it's a much better condition than what everyone thought when it happened, because he is day to day. So while he maybe doesn't even start this one, maybe comes off the bench, they're going to be monitoring him. That's a very good sign for the Crew. But regardless, I think the Crew handle this one again, continue their unbeaten run, and add another win. I'm going to say 2-0 for Columbus. Next up, it's the Red Bulls hosting the Fire. And neither of the teams picked up a win in Week 6. The Red Bulls return home, and the Fire, on the road, would not have expected this start to their road schedule, where they've now won 3 out of the 4 road games they've played, have only had 2 home matches so far, couldn't pick up a win despite taking the lead against Montreal. But the good thing for the Fire is that Acosta is finally expected back in some role. I think he could even be pushing for a start, but probably more so off the bench. And Gutierrez was working on the side, but he's already been actually ruled out by Berhalter. So that's a big blow once again for this Fire team. Still, through this Week 7, not a actual full potential lineup, with obviously Gutierrez being that number 10 out. That's going to limit their attacking potential drastically, and we saw that even in that game against Montreal, once that weather got bad as well and it was tight and it was rough. The energy was there, the tempo of the game was definitely there, but the quality in terms of setting up real chances for the Chicago front line was honestly almost non-existent in that second half. And for the Red Bulls as well, still a little bit thin on the attacking end. They're going to be getting Harper and Ganger back, but just a team that's really hard to trust for me. They lost to New England last week. That should tell you everything you need to know about just how inconsistent this start to the season's been for Red Bulls, and that's why I don't have them really in the high standings of the East, because, in this long season environment, I think that's just gonna kind of be how it falls for them. But being home here will definitely be an advantage. But this is another one where there will be rain expected, maybe not a terrible amount like the 2 Ohio games, but I think this is going to be another ugly one. Acosta returning will give the Fire a little bit more solidarity back there, and they're still looking for their first clean sheet of the season. But on the attacking end, it's hard to really trust them to really be firing on all cylinders without Gutierrez once again. I just don't see either team picking up all 3 points in this one. Just doubts on both ends for me. I say either 0-0 or 1-1 due to the conditions. The Fire haven't held a clean sheet, so maybe a little bit more towards 1-1. But yeah, just one that's very, very hard to call. Cincinnati hosting the Revs, and the Revs got their first win of the season last week, scoring 2 goals against the Red Bulls. Meanwhile, Cincinnati as well going back to winning ways against Nashville, with both these teams actually getting the win through stoppage time penalties. And this is, like I mentioned, one of the 2 games that is going to be completely disrupted by the amount of rain in this one and just the ugliness, the wind, the rain, everything. And that's where I'm going with for the third best bet. It's going to be a 2-legger. So this is the first leg of it. And I'm going with the under 3.5 in this game, getting a little bit more protection with that extra goal, but under. Obviously, because of the weather, kind of targeting that. And the fact that the Revs are statistically and on the eye test one of the worst teams from an attacking perspective, even though they got that win last week against Red Bulls. 1 goal was from a Carles Hill stunning free kick, which he can pull out of his hat at any time, but it's not going to happen every week. It's only going to happen, really here and there realistically. So, he had to carry them to this victory in which he scored both goals. The second goal was that penalty that I think was also another one of those controversial ones. And so you have still through 5 games, because they had a bye, through 5 games, 0 open play goals for the Revs. And on the other end, the Revs have been actually respectable defensively. And so they're going into this one against a Cincy team with some injury problems. Miles Robinson is a concern since he got re-injured, hasn't been training. And so that's a hit to this back line that is still expecting other players back, but maybe not yet. But from an attacking perspective, you have Evander who hasn't been training. He picked up some sort of injury. He hasn't been training. Even in today's training, didn't train. And then you also have Nwobodo, who's been confirmed out, and that's just a big hit for this attack, who is now going to be running kind of Kubo, Denke, and in that double striker kind of setup. Since Kubo kind of had recovered from his leg injury, he was full training. And you have that big creative spark out for Cincinnati in this ugly game against the Revs defense that is going to be kind of really just setting up and hanging on for dear life. And Campagna, who's been out for them, for the Revs, that is, I think, still probably about a week away from returning from his injury. But just not a game that really sets up for fireworks. The Revs, like I said, have been respectable defensively. And Cincinnati probably does win this one as well. But without as well that creative spark in Evander, it's going to be another ugly one. And I'm going to say something like a 1 or 2-0, maybe 1-0. But the Revs still haven't scored an open play goal. Hard to expect them to contribute outside Carles Hill magic. And Cincy probably wins this 1-0. Next up, it's the Whitecaps hosting the Rapids, and I am skipping ahead a little bit to one of the later games, but because of the fact that this is part of the best bet, this is the second leg of it. I'm just getting straight to it, so there isn't any confusion for this second leg. It's paired with the Cincinnati Revolution under 3.5, and in this one, I'm taking the Rapids spread. It's an alternate spread plus 1.5 with that Cincinnati game under at plus 100 odds combined. And so Rapids on the road here. They've only played 2 road games so far, but they've won both of them. 3 road games, but they haven't lost. They've won 2 of them. Drew that first week against St. Louis, and only lost that 1 game against Portland. So they've largely looked pretty good this season. And even though there's some injury concerns with Cannon, and then I think it's Ronan now out for several weeks, still that midfield is solid with Atencio and Mihailovic and Bassett and Larraz if need be. And the Whitecaps on the other end have kind of been slipping a little bit since those 4 wins in a row to open the season. This is not a team that is very much involved year by year in schedule congestion with long runs in Champions Cup. But this year, obviously, it's a different Whitecaps team because they knocked off Monterrey, and now they're in this quarterfinal against Pumas, where after the first leg, they are tied technically, but they are down due to away goals. But they go into that second leg with a fighting chance against Pumas, which is, so another one of those okay, decent kind of, maybe towards the higher end of MX teams, but still this year, definitely a team that they can once again go on the road and knock off like they did in Monterrey. And so they're also dealing with some center back depth issues. They have a couple players out there that have been out for a couple games. And also Cubas has been dealing with something, but it seems like he could feature in some sense in this one. Maybe not start, though, because of that look-ahead second leg game. The midfield is all good for Vancouver, but also Ryan Gauld's still out, still a couple weeks away. And so you have a little bit of depth concerns in these attacking and defensive areas for the Whitecaps, as well as the fact that they are on this shorter rest and schedule congestion and will have to, have a short turnaround from this game to that second leg quarterfinal, which they obviously are prioritizing. But in the past couple of weeks, they have slipped up. Like I mentioned, they lost to the Fire while dealing with the after effects of that round of 16 to Monterrey. And then last week on the road at Toronto, a pretty bad Toronto team. Yes, it was a draw, but a scoreless draw, so not the best performance. And you're getting a Rapids team that is, in my opinion, just a little bit healthier and has been a tough nut to crack this season. And it is the alternate spread plus 1.5. So I think this probably should be maybe also a little bit on the lower scoring end of things. But the Rapids also have, Zach Steffen, probably the best goalkeeper so far this season. And I think they turned things around in that win against Charlotte. They're not really a team to me that is Jekyll and Hyde in terms of away and home, such as a Charlotte. And so they're kind of back on that momentum swing. And I just don't think they're going to lose by, obviously, 2 or more goals in this one. I think they should actually contend for, even a draw or fight for the 3 points, considering the Whitecap situation. So I think we're getting pretty good odds here for this additional leg to combine everything to plus 100. And I think the Rapids, from a result perspective, actually probably pick up a point in this one, but we're keeping it safe. And we're getting good odds targeting this Whitecaps team still involved in other competitions. Austin hosts the Timbers in one of the other kind of rematches this early on in the season. These two teams faced off in week 2, and the Timbers got the win against Austin on a very late Da Costa free kick that kind of just slipped in past Stuver. And here the return game is in Austin, and Austin's really picked it up the past several weeks. 3 straight wins on the bounce now. Besides that San Diego game, all their games have been 1-0 scorelines once again. So really keeping things consistent in terms of that balance. They get the lead or go down, and it's really hard for them to kind of come back from that if they're not kind of on the break. But if they are getting a lead, then they can really shut things down. And they're really built to kind of hold on to that with kind of limited counter-attacking chances. But neither of these teams are really teams that love having the ball. They'd rather be out on the break, kind of keep things open. And, for Austin, it just wasn't really going as well, with also the fact in that first game, against the Timbers, where Uzuni, I think that was his first game kind of featuring for Austin, and he came off the bench, and Estevez still tinkering with this lineup in a bit at that time, and probably still. And you also have Bukhari kind of maybe questionable for this one, picking up a late injury in that game against St. Louis. But meanwhile, the Timbers, it's 3 straight games unbeaten now with 2 wins on the bounce, scoring 3 against Colorado as well as against Houston. So this one sets up to be an interesting one. It's one that I think is kind of difficult to call because Austin games can really be here or there for them, because that first goal is so important to the identity of this Austin team that I just don't know if it's really going to be too open of a game this time, or what this first matchup that they already had with each other will bring out of these teams, of how they adjust or not, or if things will kind of stay, kind of compact. Because I think the Timbers, just as much as Austin, would love to get out on the break, and they're definitely the hotter attack at the moment. And Austin's wins have kind of just been by these kind of isolated moments where they're slightly better, but you don't really feel all that confident about this attack still, to kind of be this lethal attack. Meanwhile, the Timbers, even though Jonathan Rodriguez is finally back actually with his visa situation, still has yet to train and is probably about another week away from actually featuring for the first time this season. And so, but still, regardless, like I said, the Timbers attack without him, especially the past couple of weeks, has been electric. Anthony has been on fire. And then Mora and Kelsey have each scored in separate weeks here back to back. And so I think the Timbers still probably get a point out of this one. I think Austin finally gets its first game with a draw this season. I just don't see much separating these two sides. I think that first game should have been a draw. It was just a terribly kind of played free kick from Austin and Stuver's perspective in that first game. But I think we get a draw in this one. I'm going to say 1-1. Moving on, it's the Dynamo hosting LAFC. LAFC goes into the second leg of its quarterfinal against Miami with a lead 1-0, but they're going to have to go on the road for that second leg at Miami, where they do have the lead, but is it really a lead when you're going to Miami? And you're really probably not going to get that same type of performance from Messi and co. 2 games in a row, especially with Miami at home for this second leg. So yes, they have the lead, and now they go into Miami where away goals are a huge factor still, and exist in Concacaf Champions Cup. So if they get a goal here, Miami would have to score 3, since they didn't score in their away game in this first leg. And so interesting minding games for that one, but regardless, it's a long travel. They have been traveling a lot recently, LA. And this is going to be their third MLS game in a row on the road after a win at KC and a loss at San Diego, where they almost came back from 3-0 down, but then got a red card earlier in the second half. And eventually San Diego held on to the win. They still actually played good enough with that man down, but couldn't convert some pretty high danger chances. But regardless, it's another situation where this might just be another slip up from LAFC, and as one of these teams still left in Champions Cup action, and the fact that they have been traveling so much, these tired legs, and all this, it just could be one of those games. Even though Houston has been terrible, no wins yet on this season, and another loss at Portland, just 2 points this season. The Dynamo down to once again from last week as well, their third choice goalkeeper. They have no pace, with a couple of those players injured until basically around the summer that would be starting on the wings. And so really it's one that's hard to call, because LAFC is the better team, but the situation lends itself towards Houston, especially being at home with LAFC's huge amount of traveling recently and full focus on advancing against Miami, where Houston could, to me, pick up its first win of the season. Not because I think they're better, but just logically from these other points and the situation that presents itself here. I think Houston at least walks away with a point in this one, but they are just hard to trust defensively, and so I think they're going to let in a goal. I think this is a 1-1 or something like a 2-1 for Houston written all over it. That doesn't mean LAFC's bad, but it's the start of the season. It's a long season, and there's so much way to work back that I think in this isolated environment here, in this isolated situation, for whatever reason, the Dynamo are just going to find a way, probably be a little bit more energetic, and are the hungrier team from an MLS perspective, since LAFC is focusing on Champions Cup. And so I'm going to call the Dynamo to get a shock 2-1 win against LAFC. Kansas City hosts St. Louis in one of the most hyped up and kind of cagey and hateful rivalries in MLS since St. Louis came into this league due to the proximity. And Kansas City fired their longtime head coach Peter Vermes finally, and after the past 2 or so years even of terrible performances, finally they fired him, and he was one of the longest tenured managers in the world. He did so much for this organization, obviously being there for however many years it was, but it was just simply time. And now they're going to have, I believe it is an interim coach, until they figure out their next steps. But they get this home match here immediately following for this rivalry game against St. Louis, and against the St. Louis side that continues to look absolutely awful in terms of the chance creation and just the danger they're able to get and chances to this front line. With Lowen out last week, you could see even after Austin took that lead, even though they had a lot of the ball, it was a lot of crosses, but a lot of just kind of almost pointless possession due to the lack of penetration they were able to get. And Teukert was out for that game. Teukert will be back for this game, but Lowen, even though he was suspended for last game and could return here, is actually out again due to personal reasons. And so that's going to limit, once again, this midfield's ability to actually keep the ball. Maybe if they're losing, Kansas City will give up the ball, because that's probably a good bet. But in a draw environment or like whatever, just to start this game, like St. Louis is not going to be able to keep the ball a lot with Lowen out. Even with him in, it was suspect, but regardless, and be able to have these transition moments where you get Becker or Klaus or Teukert now back into the fold and actually have them in some open space to attack. But Kansas City, has been terrible in their own right. Still no wins this season as well. Back-to-back losses. And outside of that comeback against Minnesota, really not much to cheer for the Kansas City team. So really two attacks that aren't clicking whatsoever. The rivalry itself will get these players fired up with all the emotions, and maybe Casey on a bit of a new coach bump. But this is one that really I don't see either team taking, and it's really probably going to be another ugly one because of just how bad both these attacks have looked. Kansas City's defense probably a little bit worse, but because of the home bump, this is just one I'm completely staying away from. And St. Louis still really not convincing me in terms of actually changing what they want to be and becoming. And so I'm going to call this one something like a 1-1 between these two rivals. Saturday's night slate ends with San Diego hosting the Sounders, and San Diego finally got its first home win of the season, beating LAFC. Meanwhile, the Sounders came back to draw at San Jose. And both these teams dealing with a bit of some injury issues. Ingvartsen, as we know, out for a couple months, but San Diego did sign a replacement striker from their Right to Dream Academy from the Danish league, I believe, or Norwegian. It's completely slipping my mind, but from the same FC Nordsjælland, and his name's Ilioski. And so whether he joins immediately in terms of the team sheet is, I think, unknown. But Chucky Lozano came back for San Diego. Meanwhile, for the Sounders, they're still dealing with, obviously, Ariel out for the season, but Pedro de la Vega and Morris still probably out for several weeks or so. And so limited depth for the Sounders, who were rich with it to begin the season. And we know how this one's probably going to go. San Diego is going to have a lot of the ball. They have the most possession in the league. The Sounders actually have second or third, I believe, most possession in the league, though. And so will they be comfortable with conceding that possession to San Diego, which I think will have the far easier time actually controlling the possession in this one on the road? Will the Sounders be comfortable in that type of environment? But regardless, I think they will be just enough. They're still a top 3 defensive team by the metrics in terms of expected goals allowed. And so I think this one's going to be a little bit harder for San Diego to navigate because I don't think Chucky Lozano is ready to start yet, just even after that one appearance last game off the bench. He's probably going to be making another bench appearance. And even though Valakari was running that false nine and it did some good things for them, I mean, 2 of those goals for San Diego were on set pieces where LAFC were just completely sleeping and just unforgivable mistakes. I mean, the second one with Lloris completely slipping up an easy, one that he should just be catching and controlling. And then the game just got out of hand from there and far too open. And so, from an open play perspective, I just don't think San Diego is going to be do enough to trouble the Sounders. But we'll have to see what kind of if we see that same type of false nine setup or if Ilioski's actually ready to go. But regardless, I think the Sounders defensively will be able to hold up and just keep things kind of low eventful. We've seen that from them a lot this season, especially in the past couple of games. And I'm going to call this one as another 1-1 draw. Move on to Sunday slate. It's a 3-match slate, and he begins with NYCFC hosting the Loons, Minnesota United. And Minnesota is a team I've been on a lot this season so far. I think maybe 3 or 4 times already. And I'm going with them again as the first leg of the final best bet here to close out the show. So this is a 2-legger. This is the first leg. And I'm going with Minnesota on the double chance. I'm getting this individually, I think, at probably worse odds than what you can get it at. If you want to play individually, I would also suggest that because it's kind of slipping in there in terms of how much juice you kind of like on your bets. It's kind of around like minus 145. So it's up to you. But regardless, I'm doing this as a 2-legger. And this is one where I honestly see Minnesota, contending for the win. They're undefeated since week 1, with 3 wins in the past 5 games, 2 other draws in both of those draws they gave up leads, where they definitely should have won. Definitely the KC one, taking a 3-0 lead. But they're also going to be fully healthy here against an NYCFC side that at home has only played 2 games, both being 2-1 victories, but I don't particularly think either was, anything too convincing in terms of, one, the opponents they played and the performances they put in, and probably could have had a case of drawing either of those games. And just last week, choked a 3-1 lead against Atlanta to lose the match on the road, so their spirits are definitely not high whatsoever. This one's going to be at Yankee Stadium. That obviously they have that, like we've talked about, incredible advantage on just due to the narrow pitch, and they're just more used to that type of pitch and the quality of it. So that's going to pose some problems, as well as a bit of some rain in this one, maybe. So maybe the under could also be a good look, but I just like Minnesota's chances in this one. I think they're going to have that extra day of rest, both of these teams, for this game, since it is on Sunday. And I think Minnesota should have no trouble at least pulling out a point in this one. They're going to be fully healthy. Dotson, yes, injured for several months, but regardless of that, this team has just simply been clicking. The patterns of play that I've been seeing, even in that game against RSL, the goals they had, the patterns there, they were moving the ball around beautifully, even on that terribly rained down pitch. And so even if we get a similar situation like that one with the rain in this one, Minnesota is just a far superior side. NYCFC is going to be struggling all season for victories. Their 2 wins this season were only against, honestly, mid-tier to very low-tier Eastern sides. And so while Minnesota does have to travel a little bit for this one, I think from a quality perspective, there's a top 2 team in expected goals through 6 weeks and a top 4 team in expected goals allowed. So this team is going to cede possession NYCFC. They're going to counter. And they're going to take their chances. I think they're just the far superior team in really every aspect. And I think they at least get a point out of this one, but should certainly be almost a really good chance of walking away with all 3 points. So that's where we're going with the first leg of this final best bet. Next up on Sunday, it's the Earthquakes hosting DC United. And this is a commemoration match, basically, with these 2 teams playing of the MLS's first ever match in its first season ever. This was the first match ever played in MLS, and a celebration as well of now the 30th season of MLS. And the weather for this one should be beautiful. And this should be a shootout. That's where I'm seeing this one going. Both these teams in top 10 or even higher for both sides of the metrics in terms of expected goals allowed. These teams have mostly had shootouts, especially DC United. And DC United being on the road even, I think, lends itself more to this one, having plenty of goals in it. And that's where I'm going with for the second leg of this last best bet, in which the first leg being that Minnesota double chance. And so in this one, I'm going with the over 2.5. And with that combined, we get that plus 142 odds. Both these teams are going to be fairly healthy for this one. Obviously, we know Lopez is out for a bit of time now for the Quakes, but they've already had a couple games without him. And they have been in some pretty poor form recently. After those 3 losses in a row, though, did manage to hold on to a point against Seattle. They took the lead and gave up a late goal. But this attack is going to be, pretty healthy from the 2-striker perspective with Arango and Josef Martinez. And with DC, I mean, Benteke is basically a lock to score almost any game. He scored in, I believe, he scored in 4 out of their 6 games. He scored last time out against the Crew. And even that alone is something I might even add, because he's plus money again to score, and he just tears this league up. And especially against the lower level opponents in both conferences, we've seen him already this season light up the score sheet almost every game, like I just mentioned. And here we get the Quakes, who defensively still, I think, potentially without Costa on that back line. And despite the fact they have made strides already this season in terms of being just a little bit more competitive under Bruce Arena, that back line is really what hurts them. And so there should be no issues to me in terms of goals in this one. This should be a great match from all perspectives, like I mentioned, with all the narrative surrounding this one, with this being a celebration of the league. And I just think this game will be very, very open. And especially, like I said, from DC United's perspective, their defense is already super, super leaky, but going on the road, that just tends to even amplify that. And they definitely should contribute in this one, because San Jose's defense shouldn't be trusted either. But that's where we're just going with over 2.5. We're getting a little bit, that's why we're combining it, right? We're getting a little bit lesser of what the true line for this game is on the over. It's basically around over 3. And so there probably should be even more goals in this. And this should be pretty much a little bit more sweat-free. Finally, the last game on Sunday Night Soccer, is Inter Miami, surprise, surprise, once again featured on Sunday Night Soccer, taking on Toronto FC. And Miami, yes, down 1-0 in that quarterfinal against LAFC, but in that home return leg should definitely put up a great fighting chance at minimum. And they return home here, where last time out they beat the Union 2-1, one of the league's best teams to start the season. So made a statement in that one, with Messi scoring just a couple minutes after finally returning from his injury, and scored a couple minutes, like I just mentioned, right after coming off the bench, which was the game-winning goal. And Toronto, still winless on this season, held out to a 0-0 draw against Vancouver, where Bryn Hildson finally came back from a bit of a knock a couple weeks back, and featured once again for one of his few appearances so far this season as one of their newest signings at the number 9 position. And will we see finally his first start, because Kerr is now out with an ankle injury for an unknown amount of time. And they're also dealing with a couple of injuries with Wingo, and Larea still questionable with whatever he was dealing with. He was supposed to get that figured out a little bit more over the international break, but didn't play against Vancouver. And I personally haven't seen an update on his status. So this one, I mean, it should be pretty straightforward. Yes, Miami has the extra travel with going to LAFC earlier this week and all that, but Toronto is just levels below Miami, and maybe we see a little bit of rotation with Messi and all that, but even if he gets like 30 minutes against this Toronto side, should be enough to influence the game enough. And yeah, I think Miami's going to be needing this one to get back on path after that first leg loss and feel a little bit better about themselves. and should just be honestly business as usual on Sunday Night Soccer. Hard to really expect Toronto to be all that competitive in this one, but I am gonna say they score. I'm gonna say Miami wins this one 3-1. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Once again, apologies about the late upload, but still wanted to get this out, even though it is only about a day away from the slate. But if you did tune in once again, very much appreciate your support. Make sure to like the video again and enjoy this weekend slate. And next week will be on a regular schedule in terms of the uploads, just as normal. So once again, enjoy week 7 slate, and I'll see you all in the next video.